Hi, so here we are back to Islam PowerPoint Part 2. I had actually kind of just ran out of time, so I'm just going to go over these last little bits of slide 3. Essentially, basically what Muhammad did by the end of his life was make Islam into the major religion of that area, of the two cities and of that land. Essentially made Islam the state religion. Now, this is extremely unique because no other religion has done that. Like, usually when a founder of a religion dies, it struggles, just like it took 300 years until Constantine made Christianity the official religion, or Judaism, which struggled and struggled and struggled, and eventually, with over the course of 2,000 years, finally becomes a main religion with Rabbinic Judaism. So none of those really developed into the official majority religion during the founder's lifetime, like Islam. So that's what he did. He essentially, you see all these dates here, bang, 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 bang. He makes all these treaties, these pilgrimages, and ultimately, when he dies of severe headaches, which many people believe he had epilepsy, and that's what seeing visions and seeing God and stuff might have been, and he had undiagnosed epilepsy because he seemed to have those symptoms. It ends up that he dies, and right after that, Umar, who's a caliph who worked with Muhammad in Medina, becomes the head of Islam, and Medina, and that's kind of the beginning of the Muslim era. Now, at that time, because Muhammad was such a huge, larger-than-life figure, he was the head of the religion. But when he dies, a split happens between the caliphs, the kind of political and governmental figures that worked with him in Medina. They said we should take it over because Islam is a state religion, and it's part of the state of Islam, as in this nation state. And then those on the religious side said, no, it's a religion, and his daughter Fatima and his son-in-law should take over as being head. So a split almost immediately happens after Muhammad dies between the Shi'at al-Ali, Shiites, who supported Ali, the party of Ali, and then the other side, which will eventually become the Sunnis. So you have the Sunnis and the Shiites, and this is kind of the beginning of that split. Now, he only had no sons, only a daughter. So this whole sequence of events that happens is actually quite complicated, and I'll explain it, but you should probably read this pretty carefully. Okay. All right. So the first thing that happens is Umar, one of Muhammad's friends, rules after Muhammad dies. All right. Then a Persian general murders Umar, the caliph, murders this guy. Uthman, another caliph, then rules after the death of Umar. All right. So it's Umar and then Uthman. Umar's son murders the Persian general who had murdered Umar, the first caliph. Uthman does nothing about that because it's like, well, who cares? That's vengeance killing for his predecessor. Ali, who was both Muhammad's cousin and the Persian general's cousin, demands revenge for the death of his cousin, which Uthman doesn't want to do because, of course, this Persian general killed his predecessor, so it seems like fair is fair. Uthman doesn't do anything. Ali murders Uthman. Okay? Then Ali becomes ruler, which geographically is actually centered more in Persia and Iraq versus Saudi Arabia and the kind of the Near Eastern part of the Middle East. So really, who's in charge? First Umar, then he's murdered. Then Uthman, then he's murdered. Then Ali, who is what people consider the rightful heir, and he becomes the ruler. And then Muawiyah, who is Uthman's other cousin, says, I want revenge on the death of Uthman. So there's a big battle called, at the battle in 661, Muawiyah, who's Uthman's cousin, fights with the Shi'at al-Ali, the party of Ali, and in the process, these two sides fight, and it ends up that Ali dies. Okay. Then there's an addition, and then Muawiyah becomes the caliph, who is actually Muawiyah or the Umayyads. That's Muawiyah or Umayyads. Ends up becoming kind of the source of the Sunnis with its power base in Syria. So not only, this is, remember, this is all like clan based, right? And Muhammad tried to eradicate that whole clan thinking, but it's very difficult to get rid of something that's been steeped in the culture. So Muawiyah, who was Uthman's cousin, who then murders Ali, or at least his forces kill Ali, then takes over and moves the power base from Persia or even Medina and Mecca over to Syria. And that is kind of the cornerstone of the Sunni or Umayyad dynasty. Then there's an additional battle in Kufa, Iraq. At this battle, Hassan, Ali's son, is killed, and also Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, is also killed. So both heirs of the Shiite party and the Sunni party, Sunni is Yazid, Shiite is Hassan, both heirs of both branches are killed. So then it's just tumult, right? Then there's like a series of caliphs who try to battle and take it over, and as a result there are just many, many different Arab and Muslim factions. Though at the core there is the Shiites and the Sunnis. Even though there are many different factions, at the core some will align one way and some will align the other way. Okay? So how do you define this new kind of, what can we get in order to kind of solidify the new Muslim state, right? You can't just have chaos and this split between the Sunnis and the Shiites. So what happens is, first of all, because there are so many different caliphs and so many people kind of like struggling for power, the spread of Islam goes wide and far pretty quickly, pretty fast, because it's a dominant religion in its home state. So here's where it was in Saudi Arabia. Here's where it expands into North Africa, all the way across to Morocco, into Spain, right? And then it goes up into Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, and over here into Iran, Persia, and Iraq. And then even further on into the kind of Istan countries, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and also northern India, Pakistan. So it basically spreads like this, okay? Now it spreads all the way over into the east. Let me make this bigger. All the way the east to in Iran, and in the, let me make this smaller a little bit. Essentially in the west, the Umayyads, or the Sunni party of Islam, have their capital in Damascus, Syria. In the east, the Abbasids or Shiites have their center in Baghdad. So it's really geographical distances and also party differences. From the 10th century on, there's a whole bunch of other regional dynasties. There's some in Egypt here called the Fatimids come to power. Also way over here in Asia, you have the Mongols. They are also Muslim. So essentially, it's this region right here where you're just going to have a whole variety of different regional dynasties, okay? As a result of all these different kinds of Islam emerging, and you notice these are all have different cultures and ideas and theologies, Sunni, Shiite, Mongols, Fatimid, etc., a new school of law develops, which is based on the Quran, the holy book, and the Hadith is written, which is a commentary on the Quran, or specifically the laws of the Quran, which is called the Sharia law. Okay, that's where you hear Sharia law. It is the laws of the Quran, and a specific school of thought wrote a commentary specifically focusing on the laws, highlighting the laws. Other things develop, like theology and mysticism. One particular branch of Islam, which actually borrowed a lot of ideas from Hindu Shaivites, where it was called Sufism, which, I don't know if you've ever heard of the term dervish frenzy. If you're in a whirling dervish, that's where Sufism comes from. Okay, modern period, 15th century to the present. Now, from the 16th to the 18th century, a lot of the Muslim dynasties were military states, probably because they were always in conflict with European countries. So it's not that Muslims are inherently military or inherently fighters or inherently murderers or whatever, but they end up being forced to be like that because the Europeans are now coming in and trying to take over the resources and encroaching on a lot of these countries that Islam was in. Okay? The Ottomans in general ruled the western regions, the Anatolia, the Balkans, the Middle East. The Safavids were more like over here in Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, and then the Moguls were over here in Asia. So what we're dealing with here, the ones who had the most amount of European contact were the Ottomans. So whenever you hear about the Middle Ages or the Crusades, that's the Christians or the Western European countries fighting the Ottomans, or the Ottoman Turks, they'll say, because most of them were in Turkey. All of these Muslim factions kind of decline after the 18th century because of European control, even though the Ottomans last the longest. Now, during the 18th century, you have a lot of Western European countries led by the British, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, and Dutch empires encroaching into a lot of these kind of older Muslim countries, and also a lot of Africa, especially down on this western coast, because they want to exploit not only slavery or free labor, but also access to silver and gold and various resources that they know they could just exploit and take out of Africa by taking advantage of the people that were there. So this because of the threat to a lot of the Muslim traditions where they were in these different regions, this provoked kind of an increased adherence to Muslim tradition. So when you say, wow, they really subscribe to Sharia law in Iran, or they really hold on to traditional customs of Islam in these various countries, part of that was a reaction against this encroaching European influence. You know, the more these foreigners come in, the more you kind of stay closer to your ties or your religion. Okay? So in 18th, 19th century, the Muslims are protecting their culture. They're protecting this kind of encroachment by European sources, and they were being essentially taken advantage of, colonized. Okay? But we hit the 20th century, and there are three major changes that elevate the Muslim countries, particularly in the Middle East. Number one is the discovery and production of oil. All of a sudden, the Middle East or Muslim countries have something that the Europeans want, and so it changes the balance of power by having the Muslim countries take control of their own resources. Number two, the development of the airplane and automobile and necessary vehicles for all countries, and this is global, the development of these types of vehicles, which require oil, which means now the Muslims have something that the rest of the world desperately wants, right? So this pushes Muslim countries to the forefront. They become increasingly independent because now they have something that they can hold over the Europeans, and they become self-sufficient because they have something that they need. However, this idea of kind of European encroachment and the Europeans kind of controlling the outcome of the world still holds, and after World War II, the League of Nations carved up the Middle East and Muslim countries, which caused a lot of the old caliphate rules, the clan-based rules, to now be secular rulers. So a lot of the stuff that, strangely enough, European countries decided, these African countries are like this, these Middle Eastern countries are like this, these Eastern European countries are like that, without really any sort of thought or foresight as to what the people themselves might want. What happened is different countries adapted to this new kind of division, this secular division that the League of Nations had decided, and some of them adapted to this new way of nationalism, either by becoming even more traditional Muslim states or becoming more secular, like Turkey. Different kinds of identities developed within these Muslim countries, some going from one extreme to the other. But today, Islam can't really separate religious and national identity, probably because Muhammad's teachings in the Quran and Muhammad even himself left Islam as a state and national identity. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a struggling minority religion. It was the state religion. So that sort of thinking is kind of embedded in Muslim identity. So that's why there's always Muslim nationalism, where you cannot separate the secular institution of government from the actual religion. There's always tension. So that's why there's a lot of misconceptions about Islam globally, especially from non-Muslim countries. Overall, what Muhammad taught, though, was a very pacifist sense, and that we're kind of all in it together to worship this one God. So we'll go over those concepts next time. Okay? All right. Bye.